The Story Chair project is a way that the women can share the stories that they want to share about themselves in a way that they want to and in a way that they're comfortable with, and how making together can be a way of working in a trauma-informed way, and how textiles can help facilitate those conversations.
I love art. I hadn't drawn for about 30 odd years. I surprised myself, to be honest.
We all have stories to tell. You and I both have stories, and we get to choose the narratives at different points. However, for women that are involved in criminal justice system, often they're asked to repeat their story, repeat the trauma.
Life can get out of control and you can find yourself in a position that you never thought you would be in, and it can happen to anybody.
One of the National Trust's big pushes is For Everyone Forever. We are very, very keen to diversify our audiences. We're very, very keen to diversify the people that volunteer with us, to see that it isn't a big scary place and it is for them.
We are looking to draw in more people to the Cathedral. We're wanting the Cathedral to be a resource for the city. It's a beautiful building, so the women felt this would be a place where they could come and be seen and heard and valued.
So compared to my normal work, this project is, I guess it's a chance for me to stretch my creative muscles, because this is going to be a one-of-a-kind piece, and it's the kind of thing that I can really sort of flourish and embellish and make quite spectacular, hopefully.
Obviously behind me there's a 200-year-old oak tree that was donated to us to then be made into the story chair. We're not entirely sure how it's going to look yet, but it will be a chair and it will be this wood.
The Story Chair is an overarching project, and it's a creative intervention designed to engage women involved in the criminal justice system. So the whole programme started off with a conversation where a woman said, wouldn't it be great to have some space where you could go and leave an old narrative that you no longer needed about yourself? You didn't want it repeated, so you just wanted to leave it there.
And the intention is that women gain skills to tell stories, to reframe stories, but also to portray their stories physically with textiles, with materials, with stitches, with fabrics, with textures, layers.
So as part of the programme, the women created 2 characters, and it was really important that we had characters involved in the programme, because the women have told us repeatedly, I don't want to talk about myself. So the women had 2 characters that they could relate the trauma to, so it didn't need to be about themselves.
So we developed 2 characters, Angelina and Alicia, and they were characters that were co-designed with the women. They are fictional characters. They're not based on any one individual. They're made up of lots of different experiences, and the idea was to create characters that lots of women who engage with the hubs could latch onto in some way.
And the 2 characters, they're life size, so they were rather large to carry about. They were taken to every session and placed at the table like the women. And the characters, they came to the group and they left the group just the same as the women did, except the women get to leave the trauma with the character.
It's easier to talk behind a fictional character because you're putting forward something that's happened to you, but it's hidden behind another character. So it gives you the confidence to say something.
The programme, though it was written as in an 8-week programme which was delivered in the women's hubs across Northumbria, it's different because most support networks that are available, they're either time limited, so the support is only available whilst you're in crisis, or it's pre-scripted and then the woman has to fit that script. We know that doesn't work, so it's important that the programme has that ability to be flexible and mould.
People were able to put parts of their life into it. It made you come out with things that you probably would never have thought about saying in a group environment like that, it just made you feel relaxed, and you knew that it was a safe place just to let go and explain parts of your life.
So the project has lots of different aims. Another aim is definitely thinking about change in arts and cultural heritage settings, to think about how women who have been involved in criminal justice are represented in their venue.
We went away, had a think about that, had some engagement with some heritage venues, and there was a 4-week programme delivered by Gibside with National Trust. And that was all about exploring your outdoor space and being confident in a venue that typically they might not have been to before.
So the groups we are working with, the majority of women hadn't visited the National Trust, and they certainly hadn't visited Gibside, even though it's quite close to them and it's on the doorstep. They're volunteering, they're helping us with essential tasks. I mean, they've done willow weaving, helping us to restore a labyrinth in our walled garden. They were laying paths, new paths within the labyrinth, and they were able to see the newts, they held newts, and they absolutely loved that.
So the women really enjoyed the project, but I think what they possibly enjoyed more was the fact that they felt so welcomed there. They weren't a group of women that were on probation, and that was definitely spoken about at the planning stage. This was just a group of women working with changing lives.
They are also learning the story of Gibside. They can kind of make a link between their lives and the lives of a lady called Mary Eleanor Bowes, who once was the heiress of Gibside over 250 years ago. We were telling them about Mary Eleanor Bowes. She had a disastrous second marriage. It was an abusive marriage. He beat her. He had control over her finances. He had a control over what she did. And this went on for years and years until she found herself in a position where she could fight back, which was quite unusual way back in the 18th century for a woman to divorce a man and regain her property.
It was enlightening, definitely interesting. I can relate to fighting and striving for something and being told that you can't do it, you're not allowed to do that, it's not your place, it's not right, it's not normal, but it's much more tolerable and understanding nowadays as it was back then. But I still think there's a long way to go.
They've gained skills, they've gained knowledge, they love being out in nature. They get that there's something in the trees, there's something in the ground that makes them quite calm and zen.
And on the way home after each session, there was a lot of conversation around, I just feel better, because they're leaving somewhere feeling better about themselves, they've done something productive.
I don't know what it is, it's magic. It's the magic of the outdoors, but they get that.
Newcastle Cathedral, we became a cathedral in 1882, and it's a resource for our city. One of the things that my role does is it's basically been going out into the wider city and connecting with different organisations and saying, look, come and help us to sort of reframe what a cathedral is for.
Never been. I'd walked past the cathedral many a time and never went in, and didn't realise, firstly, that it was a public place that I could go into any time. It's a beautiful place.
The cathedral has 3 values: radical welcome, inspiring worship, and empowering worth. And taking the first one of radical welcome, it seemed to me that one of the things that we do is we actually look around and see, well, who isn't here? And we go out and make connections with a wider community. And that's what happened with Changing Lives and with the Ministry of Justice group. And can you help us as a cathedral to begin to tell the stories of women?
So we went down and we had a wander around. Everyone was very welcoming. We spoke about how females in general are underrepresented in the cathedral and why that might be. But as we walked along the cathedral, there's a small room to the left, which is known as the crypt. And just because we're nebby by nature, the women said, what's in that room?
So when we did the tour of the cathedral and we got to the crypt, they were asking what a crypt was. So this is the crypt. So a crypt is a place located in a church where, when people die, that was where their body was put out to rest, and it was where people could then go and say goodbye to the body. The women seemed to be fascinated by this. It really captured their imagination. They liked the idea of telling their stories and also as a way of saying goodbye to their past.
So we had lots of conversations about what's going to represent this narrative in this crypt. And the women said, it's a story, it's a chair. This chair needs to tell a story. And instead of that old saying of walk a mile in my shoes, sit your backside in my seat and I'll share with you some of my story. So the chair was born. It was a definite chair. And then at the same time, or thereabouts, we had the storms in the North East. And they lost a tree at Gibside, and they were talking about looking for a worthy cause to donate the wood to. So we were discussing about Story Chair, and they said, how about, would you like the wood from this 200-year-old tree at Gibside? Absolutely, we wanted that wood to be part of the chair. So that's what we did.
So what we're hoping to do is get some carpenters involved. We're going to get the women involved as well and make that into a workshop. We're not entirely sure how it's going to look yet, but it will be a chair and it will be this wood.
So one of the core themes throughout this project has been trees and the tree. And I'm absolutely potty about trees. Trees are one of my main passions in life. Now this is one of the amazing Turkey oak trees. There's a big avenue of huge oak trees, which was exciting in its own respect, but quite daunting as well because this was a huge tree. So I was asked to work with a group of women that Changing Lives work with. They told me a lot about the project and I thought it was fascinating. With the group, we worked out what the chair needed to do. We talked about kind of the narrative behind the work. This all helps to build the feeling and the scheme around the chair. I went away and did some design sketches and proposals, came back and presented them to the group, and we kind of discussed them, pulled them apart and rebuilt them.
I guess maybe it's about making it less perfect, do you think?
Like all the branches intertwined and all over the place a bit.
And then I came up with the final design, which everyone was happy with. And that was the point where I had to start cutting up this huge oak tree from Gibside. So I used a chainsaw mill to chop the tree into planks. We managed to roll these logs onto the chainsaw mill that I have, which are incredibly heavy and quite difficult to maneuver. And then once it's on the mill, I can run my chainsaw along and can chop it into different thicknesses of planks and then put it in stick to help it to dry a little bit. That means that I put the planks all together but with a gap between them so the air can flow through.
Textiles have meaning to all of us in some way, whether that's our only connection to them is from the clothes we wear, the blankets that we really like. But very often, textiles are also about relationships we have in our lives, whether that's with our mothers or grandmothers or aunts. And whether or not that relationship is positive or negative with textiles, we all have some kind of relationship to it. So the materials very much were used as conversation starters and as ways of highlighting new aspects of stories or unveiling other parts of the characters' stories, or by imagining different futures for the characters as well. They're a bit careful with the materials to start off with, but when they get into it, it's really amazing seeing them kind of just touching materials and interacting with them in different ways and using them to say things through the materials that before they maybe wouldn't have been able to articulate.
So I've been steam bending the wood to make the main structure of the chair. It softens the timber and softens the fibres, and you can bend it carefully, but you can bend it.
Hopefully it's going to work a bit like this. So we've got various different radiuses of curves and different thicknesses, and we're going to build these up to make the final composition.
The next step is to put all these curved components together. So the chair itself is a bit like a tree in the fact that it has lots of stems. They might just sort of interweave and change direction and cross over and interact with each other. And that, I guess that's a little bit like the metaphor of the path of life. You know, we all choose our paths, we all choose which direction we might want to go in, and the components within the chair are kind of reflect that a little bit as well.
Being on probation makes you feel like you're in the wrong. You feel the wrong. It's just myself that makes us feel wrong. But coming to the groups has made us feel like I'm doing something right.
I think the hardest thing for any woman that's involved in the criminal justice system is the guilt and shame that they carry themselves and enforce upon themselves on a daily basis. And often it's whatever's going on in their own minds that's more damaging than anything that the criminal justice system can enforce upon them.
This was the very first time I'd ever been arrested and put on probation. And I mean, the experience for me was just horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
But what's exceptionally important is that the women also, you plant the seed that there is hope. You no longer have to tell that narrative. We don't shy away from the fact that they've hurt people or that they've been involved in criminal activity. But what we do say is that was then and this is now. And you get to create that hope for yourself. And we're going to show you some skills that might help you do that.
I'm really happy with the way the chair's turned out. It's been a really interesting process and quite a rewarding process because it was a really good chance for me to stretch my creative muscles, but also work with a group like this. It's not the kind of thing you get to do every day, but now it's all done, I'm really happy with the result.
I've gained a lot of confidence from coming to Story Chair. Confident about where I'm going and confident that I can do the things, make the changes.
It's changed a lot of things in my life. I've got more belief in myself. I am thinking about starting drawing again because I'm starting to get a clear head again.
It's kept me in more of a straight line. It still gets zigzaggy, but my direction now, I've got more direction.
It's important that lessons are learned for future women coming through the system, but for the women that we've worked with, it's also important that they are given that ability to move on. Everybody has the right to be forgotten.
And life is a little bit untidy sometimes, you know, but you can tidy it up.